Good morning, Journey Church. How's everybody doing this morning? Woo! I love that video. Pepper, the little baby, she was like, I want to say something too. I want to say something too. It was awesome filming that. Thank you, John and Angelica, wherever you are. Hey, if you are new with us, as they mentioned, there is a connection card in your seat pocket in front of you. Grab that. We'd love to get to know you. And in fact, right behind this wall, there is a station, and there's somebody there that wants to give you a little gift for joining us this morning. It's just our little way of saying thank you for joining us on this Easter Sunday. There's some goodies in there and some treats that you can enjoy throughout the city and some of the vendors here. So make your way there at the end of service. Let me look into that camera and welcome everybody that's online. We love you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Happy Easter to you. Wherever you find yourself, we're so glad that you're worshiping with us. I hope you're enjoying your worship experience today, and it's a treat to have you online. You're not an afterthought. We see you, we're waving to you, and we say hello. All right, for those of you that are here, you guys ready? It's just so awesome. 24 hours ago, people from all over the world, in nations that you've probably never heard of, languages that we've never even known existed, began to worship. Millions and billions of people started to declare that we have a risen Jesus. They started to study. They started to teach on. They started to think about a resurrected King that has come and defeated hell, death, and the grave. And the power of sin is no longer on their people that have put their faith in Jesus. It's awesome. And now, everybody, it's our turn to make that declaration and to share in that joy with them. So glad that you're here with us this morning, and we pray that God would speak to your heart as we will be learning about Jesus, our living hope. That's, in fact, the title of my message this morning, Jesus, our living hope. Quick question, any optimists in the room? Any optimists? Yeah, a couple of you guys, right? I'm not necessarily an optimist. However, I don't consider myself a pessimistic person either. I'm more of a realist. Like, we'll see how things kind of progress. I know some of you are like, no, Pastor, I'm an optimist. The glass is always half full. The sun's coming out tomorrow. Everything's going to be good in Jesus' name, right? But I know that this last season, the last couple of years, man, our optimism has been pressed upon, right? And has been challenged. And some of us, I know some of the most optimistic, positive people in the world, when thrown into a global pandemic, boy, all bets were off. They became pessimistic really fast. And unfortunately, I was in that boat for a season there too. Let me give you an example. My wife and I, we love food. So we're kind of foodie people, right? Just your typical Portland people. We'd love to go to all these restaurants and explore all these new cuisines and fine dining and stuff. And of course, COVID crashed that, right? And so most of our favorite restaurants, in fact, even closed down. So, we're sitting there and during the pandemic. Well, what do? Okay, well, I'm going to try to cook some of my favorite recipes. All right, so where do I go to learn how to do that? YouTube University. Come on, somebody, right? So I'm online just watching this stuff unfold, and I'm like, okay, I can do that, step 1. I can do that, step 2. I can do that, step 5, step 7, steps 12, step 17. I'm like, who am I kidding? I can't cook, man. I am not Bobby Flay, clearly. Remember, I'm a realist. Like, that's not going to happen. Now, my wife, thank God she was a good cook, and thank God she carried us, everybody, because it was not going to happen with me. And unfortunately, I thought to myself, okay, all I have is hope that as soon as this pandemic gets over, I'm going to go to my favorite restaurant and I'm just going to enjoy it like never before. And how many of us ever said this? I'm never taking it for granted again, right? Anybody ever said that, right? And so things started to open up and kind of return to normal. And I can remember vividly going back to my favorite place. I won't tell you where it is because then you guys will all go there. But I remember going to my favorite place and eating my favorite dish, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is like manna from heaven, right? This is so good. Thank you, Lord. Woo! Go back a couple days later. Wow, this is amazing. This is so good. Go back a couple days later. Yeah, this is pretty good. This is great. Go back about a month later. Got anything else on the menu? Right? Like it just kind of all fizzled out. It just kind of died. Now, maybe some of us can relate to that. Maybe you can relate to that. Maybe for you, it wasn't a restaurant, or maybe for you, it wasn't going to a place, but rather a destination. Maybe you were looking forward to Disneyland, or maybe you were looking forward to that dream vacation, or some of you were looking at, man, if I could just get back to work, considering all that's going on in my home, right? If I could just get back to the gym, and, I would love to re-rack those weights, said no one ever. But anyways, or some of us were like, man, if I could just go out with my boys one last time, or with my girlfriends and just enjoy the time, all this doom and despair and this misery would cease. And here we are 3 years later. Almost everything is back to normal, or at least a new normal. And one thing I could think we could all agree to, that we've all learned in the last couple of years, that optimism is eventually running out of gas. It's run out of gas. And here we are post-pandemic, and many of us are just as hopeless as before, as during the pandemic, if not even more so now. And when you look around the world, we don't find a lot of reasons to be hopeful, do we? All you got to do is look at the news, and you'll see wars, and you'll see corruption, and you'll hear about injustice, and you'll hear about disease, and you'll hear about everybody's got an angle, and everybody's working something, and everybody's got an agenda, and truth is so hard to find and filter through all the noise, and it just feels like hope is a little unrealistic. For some of us, hope feels like a fairy tale, maybe, embraced only by the naive. But deep down inside of us, if we're honest today, we all need some hope. See, optimism says, try to look on the bright side. That's what optimism says. Hope says, no, there actually is a bright side. There is something better to this. It's deeper, it's more substantive. Your heart needs hope, not just optimism, but true living hope. Question, so where do we find a hope like that? Because hope needs proof, right? Hope needs evidence for the soul. It can't just be this pie-in-the-sky optimism. It has to be rooted. It has to be deeper than that. So where are you going to turn when optimism runs out? Where are you going to turn when just optimism for the next thing or the next event isn't enough, where it just doesn't fill the gaps? And that is where we find the first century disciples and friends of Jesus. They had all this optimism and hope that this Jesus of Nazareth would be their long-awaited Messiah. Messiah is just another word for Savior. This is who he was going to be. And they hear him teaching about this coming kingdom, and he's going to establish a new kingdom. And for them, it meant finally we're going to be free of the Roman oppression. Finally, Israel is going to rise to the power that it once had, to the glory before. And then almost like a bad nightmare, in a few days, it's all over. This long-awaited and hoped for Messiah, their Savior, is dead. And we actually find his closest friends and followers doing exactly what his closest friends and followers would do, because they're assuming that Jesus would do exactly what dead guys do, and that is stay dead, right? So the sun began to come up on the day after the Passover, when it was safe to go out. And these people are going about their business, and a group of women decided, hey, we're going to go to the tomb. And here's what the text says. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Salome brought spices. So if you will, these three ladies were the original Spice Girls. You see? Couldn't help myself, sorry. So they bring these spices to try to anoint the body of Jesus, right? And the reason is because Jesus wasn't properly embalmed. You see, everybody's going to sleep on Thursday night thinking everything is good. And then Friday morning, they rises. Jesus gets arrested the night before. Things are happening so fast. Before they get a chance to check their Insta or their social media, man, Jesus is resurrected. And it's just like, whoa, these things happen so fast. And here are these women, they hear about it, they run, and whoa, there's the cross, and they're just staying back and thinking, what is going on? Like, what is happening to our Messiah? They believed that this was the teacher that was sent from God because they heard of all his great teachings. He was the great healer because they experienced all the miracles that he had performed. And he did so many things. And like many others, they thought that this indeed was the Messiah. But they were wrong, because here's their expected Messiah dying on a cross. I mean, how could God allow his Messiah, the Son of God, to be arrested? Certainly wouldn't allow him to be executed by a foreign power. And so they watch Jesus die. And because of the urgency of the day and the upcoming Passover celebration in Jerusalem, Jesus is not properly embalmed. He is just thrown into a tomb. Stone is rolled over the cave. And before the sun passed, these women are heartbroken. So as the sun comes up, they go to the tomb and do what only they know how to do. Is how do we grieve properly? Well, we're going to go with the spices and embalm Jesus and give him a proper burial like we know how, so we can have a moment to grieve. And watch what the text says. Very early on in the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, who's going to roll the stone away? I mean, man, that was sealed by the guards. Who's going to take that away? But when they looked up as they entered the garden where their tomb was, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled away. And so they go in, and there's nobody there. The tomb is empty. But here's something very important for you that perhaps you didn't hear in Sunday school growing up as a kid, or perhaps you didn't go to church much or have never gone to church much and you don't hear these details. These women who loved Jesus, who followed Jesus, did not believe it was a miracle. They assumed exactly what you would expect them to assume. They assumed that someone had stolen the body. So they immediately run back to the city to find Jesus' other disciples, the group of disciples that were so on fire for Jesus. And Jesus, we're going to do anything with you and anything for you. And they run and they find them, guess where? Hiding in fear. They're hiding because Pilate had just told the Pharisees and the teachers of the law that they could crucify their leader. So now they assumed it was open season on them and all the Jesus followers. Watch what John says. He says, so they came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, that's John. He's writing this and said, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb. That's the report from the Spice Girls, right? There's no mention of the resurrection. There's no mention of the miracle. They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. And probably more disturbing is we don't know who the they are. And Luke tells us that the men in the room whose hearts were broken, the men in the room who suddenly their future went dark, they were skeptical. And here's what the text says, but they did not believe the women because their words seemed to be like nonsense. Now, pause just for a moment on the narrative. It could be that you are like so many people that you have respect for Jesus. You believe that Jesus was a historical figure. Not too long ago, there was a season when scholars didn't really believe that there was a historical figure. Now that there is evidence has arisen and they've done a lot of research, most scholars, that season has gone. Most scholars agree, yes, there is a Jesus who lived in Nazareth. Yes, there was a Jesus who's taught some great things. Yes, there was a Jesus who riled up the people. And maybe that's your story today. Maybe you're here and you're like, yeah, there probably was a historical Jesus. There probably was, he said some great things. Even some of his life is worth emulating and following. But man, this resurrection thing, Pastor, that's a little too much. I don't know about that. And if that's where you are this morning, I have good news for you. You are in good company because Jesus' best first century friends and followers felt the exact same way. This whole idea of a resurrection didn't even cross their mind. The body of their friend had been stolen, and now they needed to find out who took the body and where they placed the body. And so the text tells us that Peter and John, at the report of these women, get up and they run over to the grave. Here's what it says. Peter, however, got up, ran to the tomb, bending over. He saw the strips of linen. So these were what was used to embalm the body of Jesus temporarily, lying by themselves. And he went away, watch this, not shouting, he's alive, we have a resurrected king. No, he went away what? Wondering, man, what in the world just happened? How could this be? And again, this is so interesting, all these details. The New Testament writes that these men who wrote the New Testament actually record their skepticism and their unbelief. The very people who would become the spokeswomen and the spokesmen for this new movement that's about to begin, they are writing and documenting their own skepticism. They're documenting their own belief. They said, here's how the story actually happened. We'd love to tell you a different story. We'd love to tell you a story of how we were awaiting the resurrection and how the body of Jesus was, when it went missing, we immediately knew that he was risen from the dead in the resurrection, and we're going to go tell everybody in the world. That's the story we would like to tell you. We would actually look a lot better if we were men and women of faith like that, who never gave up hope, but that's not the story. We had no hope. Our hope died. And even when we found the tomb empty, we did not assume a miracle. In fact, the text tells us that later on that evening, the same day of the week, when the disciples were together, watch what they were doing. They were behind closed doors because they were in fear of the Jewish leaders. John was one of the men in the room. He's the one writing. And he says, as much as I hate to tell you this, as much as I know this will make us look really, really bad, this is the truth. We were locked up that night in a room, fearing for our lives because of the Jewish leaders. Jesus' body is missing. The tomb has been opened, and we're not running through the streets shouting, he's alive, he's alive, he's alive. We're actually just as scared as the night before, and we're thinking, what do we do now? Do we just return? I guess we just return to our hopeless, meaningless life that we had before this Messiah figure found us. And that is where I would venture to say many of us are today. Because if you think about it, during COVID, we were all so hopeful. Man, if we can just get through this pandemic, if I could just get through this slumping economy, if I could just get through this illness, I could see my friends again. Man, I could see grandma again, right? Woo, remember when we were avoiding grandma, not so that she doesn't die? Okay, maybe that was just me, but yeah, there you go. Then there would be hope. Things would be better, right? And sadly, we found that this optimism and this hope eventually runs out of gas. And in fact, it seems like the great thinkers of our time don't offer us a lot of hope either. If you look at the philosopher, the sages in the last 1,500 years, what you'll find is this overarching message. It all seems to be the same. Your life is basically meaningless. You know, you're just a collection of atoms. You're a random collision of molecules. You're just a evolutionary accident. There's nothing transcendent. There's nothing eternal about you. In fact, in the early 1900s, Leo Tolstoy taught us that the only absolute knowledge attainable by man is that life is meaningless. Well, thank you, Leo. That's really encouraging, right? Never seen that one on a coffee mug. Cheers to Leo, right? Here's French philosopher Albert Camus. Here's what he says. He said, life is meaningless, but it's worth living, provided that you recognize it's meaningless. Like, okay, not feeling any better, right? But my favorite is Bertrand Russell. Look at what he said. This is a lengthy quote, but it's worth reading. The man is the product of causes which had no prevision of the end that they were achieving. That his origin, his growth, his hopes and fears, his loves and his beliefs are but the outcome of accidental collocations of atoms, that no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought and feeling can preserve an individual life beyond the grave. That all our labors of the ages, all the devotion, all the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system. And the whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of a universe that is in ruins. All these things, if not quite beyond dispute, are yet so nearly certain that no philosophy which rejects them can hope to stand. Only within the scaffolding of these truths, only on the firm foundation of unyielding despair can the soul's habitation henceforth be safely built. Wow! Aren't you glad you're not married to that guy? Right? I mean, you wake up in the morning, hey, honey, how's your night? It's fine, except the unyielding despair of life. That's all it has to offer. I'm doing good otherwise. How about you? Right? I mean, he was serious, and he's considered one of the sharpest, smartest minds of his generation. Now, question, is that all that life has to offer? Is that all that we have, this skepticism and optimism and hopefulness that's just on repeat, on loop, looking for that next thing? Or is there a hope that actually changes everything? Let's go back to our narrative. Here's what John says. While they were locked away together, hearing of the events that had happened in fear and disillusion, their Savior is dead, their hope is dead, look what happens. Jesus shows up. Jesus pays them a visit. Jesus comes and says, hello, friends, peace be with you. And it's so encouraging because that's what we've been praying would happen this morning. That's what we've been praying would happen in your heart and in your story, that Jesus would show up in the middle of your hopeless despair, in the middle of your dead optimism and just looking for that next thing. If only we can get there, Jesus would show up. And here's an understatement. They were startled and frightened, thinking, man, this is a ghost. Like, it's Casper, right? And Jesus said to them, as he commonly does in these events, in circumstances like this, he says, why are you troubled, and why do doubts rise in your mind? Like, really, Jesus? You were just dead a night before. We saw you hanging on the cross, and now here you are, alive and well. And I think Jesus, with a big grin on his face, like he would often do, often in life, he would just ask them, hey, why are you afraid? Why do you continue to be afraid when there's nothing to be afraid of? And I can see the disciples just saying, man, because we're about to die. We're on a boat. That's another story where they're getting in water and they're capsizing. Why are you afraid? We're in peril, Jesus. Bad things are going to happen. Why do you not believe? Here's what he said. He told them, this is that which is written. The Messiah will suffer and rise from the dead on the third day, and repentance and forgiveness of sins will be preached in his name to all nations, beginning in this very city. And then Jesus says something to them that would change their lives forever. Jesus says something to them that would ultimately change our lives forever. Many of us in this room, Jesus would say something that this is why 2,000 years later, people from all over the world and nations and tongues that you've never even heard of are worshiping this resurrected King because of what Jesus would say to these men who are hiding in fear, where hope is dead. And he says this, gentlemen, he says, you are witnesses of these things. And indeed they were. They were eyewitnesses to the event that triggered a movement that changed the world. And it's so important for you to remember if you're a Christian. It's so important for you to know if you're considering Christianity. It's so important for you to know if you've ever rejected Christianity. It was the resurrection of Jesus that created Christianity and launched the church. It was not the teachings of Jesus. It was not the miracles of Jesus that he performed. It wasn't even his virgin birth. It wasn't even the Bible. There was no Bible at the time yet. It was the resurrection of Jesus that created Christianity and launched the church. Because before the resurrection, it's so clear from the Gospels, before the resurrection, there were no Christians. Right? After Jesus died, everybody quit believing. Everybody unfollowed, unclicked. We're not following. John, Mary, Peter, these people that were closest to Jesus, they all admit nobody was expecting a miracle for him to rise from the dead. Now, if you're at church for the very first time, or you've heard this story, or you haven't heard this story for a long time, it's so important that you understand this. The reason that we believe Jesus rose from the dead is the testimony of these eyewitnesses. See, we don't believe Jesus rose from the dead because the Bible tells us so. It's way better than that. We believe Jesus rose from the dead because Matthew was there and he was a firsthand eyewitness and he sees it and he writes it down. We believe because Mark was there and he talked to Peter who told him the story and he believed and he wrote these things down. We believe because Luke said, I've chronicled, I've searched, I've scoured and put together every story about this Jesus and I saw him and he was there and he is alive. And John, who was there, he said, I looked into the tomb and I saw Jesus and he is alive. And Peter would write and say, I spoke to Jesus after the resurrection. He showed himself to me. And get this is so amazing. James, the brother of Jesus, who before the resurrection was like, man, Jesus is hanging out with all these losers and all these, people, I don't even know who he is. But then he dies and he shows up. And if we were to ask James, man, he says, Jesus is Lord. Now think about this. For those of you that have brothers, what would it take for you to convince your brother that you are God? Right? We laugh, but that was James. And if we were to ask James, what was it, man? He would say, I seen him die on the cross. And then he showed up. And man, I can't deny, he is who he said he was. He is the Lord. He is the Lord. And historically, it's undeniably that James, the brother of Jesus, after the resurrection, became a leader in the church at Jerusalem where these events happened. And the resurrection, this event is the foundation of the Christian faith, and it has profound implications for your life and for my life. It has profound implications for your hope and my hope, and it has profound implications for the things that you dream about and for the happiness that you're desiring in this life. In fact, Peter was not just one of the apostles. He's kind of like the head of all these apostles, right? Peter's name is mentioned in the Gospels more than anyone other than Jesus. Peter, outside of Jesus, speaks the most, and Jesus speaks to Peter the most out of any other individual. This Peter, who, when Jesus goes with him fishing, believes he is the Messiah, and then when Jesus is arrested, he unbelieves, and then when this slave girl calls him out, "You're one of the Galileans," he denies he ever believed, and then after the resurrection, he says, "Now I re-believe," right? You guys follow all that? That's Peter, right? Peter would be a pretty old man at this time, and he would eventually be executed under Nero's Rome, and he actually wrote many letters, 2 of which survived antiquity, and they're actually found in your New Testament text. And here's what Peter would say about this Jesus. Here's what it says: "Praise be to God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ." That's how he starts. Now, this sounds like an introduction to a letter. Nothing big deal, right? Move on, Pastor, which that's kind of what it is, but it's really a profound statement. Peter actually believed that Jesus was the Son of God. God was his Father. And here's what he says: "In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a," say it with me, everybody, "living hope." Living hope. And Peter is saying, hey, as I look back and understand what Jesus taught, and I was an eyewitness to the resurrected Jesus, I realized that this resurrection was made available to us, has made available to us a different kind of life, a new life, a living hope. And here, hope is not a verb. Hope is not a "I hope so." Hope is a noun. See, he's saying we have this extraordinary hope. Peter is saying that the hope that I'm talking about is not just a concept, it's not just hope as an idea, hope as a teaching, hope as a mantra. No, that's dead hope. That's not living hope. That's just hope in the term and the definition of the concept. The hope that I'm talking about is a person, not a principle, and his name is Jesus. And if we're to stop Peter mid-sentence and say, "Peter, what is the basis of your hope?" Well, was it the story of the prodigal son? Was it the story of the Good Samaritan? Was it the healings or when you fed the 5,000? I mean, what is the basis of your hope? What is it that you could look back on life and subsequently now as an old guy and say, "Man, this is why I was hopeful because my life has changed"? What is that hope? And I can just imagine Peter, an old man, taking a deep breath and saying this: "In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead." From the dead. So our true, living, lasting hope is found in the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. That was the basis of his certainty. That was the basis of his hope. Not something that Jesus had said, but it was rather something that Jesus did. And he goes on, watch this in verse 4. And he says, "This new life that I'm talking about includes now an inheritance that cannot perish, spoil, or fade." Now think about this. Who gets an inheritance? Children do. Children get inheritance, right? And Peter would go on in this letter and he would tell us that, man, this thing is not only history, this thing is not only like a report of what happened, this thing is actually relational. It's personal. That through Jesus, we now have the opportunity to have a unique kind of relationship with God that has never been available before. The type of relationship that Jesus inaugurated the night when he said, "I'm establishing a brand new covenant with God and man." It's no longer God and a nation, it's now God and individuals. And you can call this God who was once distant, far away, don't get near, you can call him Father, Daddy, Abba, which is the most endearing Hebrew word for father. That's the type of relationship that this God now has granted you because of the resurrection. But what comes next, I think, is the most extraordinary of all. Here's what he says: "This inheritance is kept in heaven for you," for those who believe. And here's something I don't want you to miss, okay? Peter did not believe in heaven because he was taught as a little boy. Peter did not believe in heaven because, he went to Sunday school like we bring our kids and, oh yeah, there's a heaven and Jesus loves you and you're going to go to heaven one day. No, that wasn't the case. In fact, that wasn't the case for over 50% of the Jewish people because they had no real theology of an afterlife. They had no real understanding of heaven and things like that. Because if you read the Old Testament, if you read the Jewish scriptures, there's virtually no mention of this idea of an afterlife. Everybody just went to the same place, the place of death. They called it Sheol. They went to that place of death, and there was no understanding, no theology. And so when you read the New Testament and Jesus starts talking about there is a heaven and there is more to this than you can imagine, and I'm establishing a new kingdom. And Peter is listening to this. He's probably thinking, yeah, that's great, kind of pie in the sky type of stuff, but not really something that I can hang my hat on. But then when Jesus resurrects from the dead, he can say with certainty, man, there really is a heaven. There really is an afterlife. I saw you die, and now you're alive having breakfast with me on the beach. You pretty much have to believe anything that person says. And he goes on and he says this. He says that all of this you greatly rejoice. Now, once again, watch this. He's going to intersect with some of your doubts today. He's going to intersect with some of you for the very reason that you don't believe in God. He's going to intersect with some of your doubts for some of you who have rejected God. And that is why would a good God allow suffering in the world? Here's what he says. You rejoice greatly, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief and all kinds of trials. Please don't miss this. Peter did not doubt God's existence and did not doubt God's love based on suffering, right? And can I be a little personal with you? The amount of suffering that Peter experienced was undeniable. I mean, unimaginable to us today. The suffering that he saw people go through, the suffering that he saw the Jewish people go through, the suffering that he himself experienced, the suffering that Christians experienced in that day did not undermine his faith in God. And here's why. Peter's faith wasn't tethered to some imaginary God who never allows bad things to happen to good people. Peter would tell you, man, I don't know, like that's not the God that I know. I don't believe in that God. But Peter, how can you come to believe in a good and loving God in spite of the pain and in spite of the suffering that you've seen in the world? How could you say this? And he would say this, because I saw the worst thing imaginable happen to the best person that I've ever known. The person who was perfect in every way, and they killed him. And he rose from the dead, and he spoke of a good God, and he spoke of a good Father. And as difficult as it was for me to believe that before, now I see it even more because I've experienced Jesus alive, and I believe it anyway. My faith is in God who raised Jesus from the dead. And what the resurrection did for Peter is what the Heavenly Father wants to do in you and in me. Because the resurrection framed his entire life, reframed his entire life. This is Peter who in the Garden of Gethsemane was running for fear, and after the resurrection was running boldly, even at the cost of his life, towards the things of God. And now as he's writing this letter, he kind of concludes, and at this point he pivots and moves away from the resurrection and now points back to the significance of the crucifixion of Jesus. Here's why we have living hope, and here's what he said to them. For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors. So this empty way of life where we're just seeking all these possessions, where we're just seeking all this stuff, where it's just empty optimism and empty hope, or just some, man, if we could just get onto this religion thing and we can do this religion thing, hopefully we will somehow earn our way to God. That's not how you were redeemed. He says you were redeemed with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb that was without blemish or defect. In other words, God is for us because Jesus died for us, not because things always work out for us. You see, the foundation of the Christian faith, the reason that we are here is an event that has profound implications on my life and yours. And it's how we know for certain that God answers our prayers. It's how we know for certain that suffering is not the absence of God. It's how we know for certain that heaven is real. It's how we know for certain that there is life after death. It's how we know for certain that the claims that Jesus made were actually real. Jesus claimed so many things during his life that were unimaginable and so hard to explain. And people were just dumbfounded by some of this. But after his resurrection, it kind of punctuated everything that Jesus said. It punctuated everything that he taught, including this thought that Jesus offers and can give you forgiveness. And that was one of the things that drove the religious Jewish leaders of the day crazy. They could say, man, you can't say that. Like only God has the authority to say that. You can't forgive people's sins. And I can just imagine Jesus grinning and just moving on and his disciples in tow thinking, they're right. They're right. Only God has the power and authority to forgive sins. But when Jesus rose from the dead, it's punctuated his authority and ability, and he has the power to forgive. And this is where it becomes personal for us today. Because of the resurrection, Jesus Christ's forgiveness is available to you. A new life is available to you. God's presence in the midst of trials is available to you. Heaven is real and it's available for you. Living hope is available for you. Living hope is available for you. You know, during any other Sunday of the year, you guys are so on fire and woohoo, yeah, amen, preach it. And you guys do this every Easter. It's just silent and dead in here. Living hope is okay, never mind. You get the point, right? Here's the most important thing in life. It's knowing Christ and experiencing the power of the resurrection. That's living hope. That's why the apostle describes it this way. I want to know Christ and what? Experience the mighty power that raised him from the dead. Experience it. This is one of my favorite Easter verses always, and I mention this almost every year, and we're going to close with this. Romans 8:11. The Spirit of God, worship team come up, we're going to close with this. The Spirit of God raised Jesus from the dead. Now watch this. So the amount of power to get Jesus out of the grave, you ready for this? It wasn't a one-time deal. It wasn't just for Jesus. It was never intended to just be a holiday where you go, pretty good, Jesus. Good on you. Way to go. Awesome. Okay, good. Worship team's coming. Right? Here's the point. You don't just have to celebrate Easter. Listen to me very carefully. We have the privilege now to experience Easter. We can experience resurrection life. And it goes on and it says, just as, or in the same way Easter happened, God raised Christ from the dead. Watch this next line. He will, not maybe, not if, he will give life to what? To every mortal place, every mortal emotion, every mortal hope, every mortal dream, every mortal faith that is in this room, every mortal optimism. He will give hope. He will give living hope. How? By the same Spirit that's living in you. And that's what we so desperately want for you. That's what we so desperately want you to experience this Sunday. And that's great news because resurrection power is available for you. Let me say it this way. God never intended Easter power to come and just be there as a celebration. God intended Easter power to come to make you come alive. You probably heard this before, and a lot of preachers say this time of year, and it's true. God didn't just come to make bad people good. God came to make dead people come alive. Come alive. And that power, the resurrection power, is available to you. There's living hope that is available to you this day. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to sing. We're going to worship big. Don't go anywhere, because after we sing this beautiful song about the resurrection, you may look around and think, man, why are these people singing so loud? Why are they so fired up and impassioned? I'm going to tell you why, because we've experienced living hope. And my question for you today is, have you ever experienced living hope? Because if you haven't, you can today. Jesus is here right now. The resurrected King is here right now. As we've gathered, just as the disciples gathered 2,000 years ago in fear and hiding, we're here celebrating. Jesus is here, and he wants to speak to your heart.